I'm welcoming to the show right now Andrew Bostom. He's an academic MD and the author of The Legacy of Jihad, The Legacy of Islamic Anti-Semitism. Oh, and Sharia versus Freedom, but we're having problems getting him. So we'll be with him in just a moment, I'm sure. So anyway, Rand Paul has caused a big ruckus because of his comments about the idea that ISIS exists and grew stronger because of the hawks in the Republican Party. I wonder how that made you feel. Did it bring you up short? It brought me up short. You know, I happen to be somebody who's full of self-doubt. I thought, wow, could that be? I mean, I know that Rand's a little bit, crazy in that libertarian way. But I think, first of all, to say that ISIS exists and grew strong, first of all, I think that he needs to retract some of his speech there. I think it came out wrong. I think that the point is interesting, but you know what? We're going to ask Andrew Bostom, who just joined us. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Hi, Sam. Thanks for having me on.
I introduced you before you arrived, so don't think that I didn't introduce you with the names of all your books, because Andrew's a prolific writer. And you didn't hear it, but I played Rand Paul's comments. I'm sure you heard them in the media because the media is running wild with them, because here's Rand Paul, who's running on the Republican ticket running, I should say, for the Republican ticket, and comes out and blames the Republican hawks for the existence and the strength of ISIS. What do you make of that?
I think that's an absurd contention. But by the way, I did hear your comments. I did hear the comments on your live stream, which is a wonderful thing to listen to.
Oh, fantastic!
It's an absurd comment, Sam. I mean, look, a colleague of mine over at the National Review, an Iraq War veteran and a wonderful lawyer, David French, summed it up in a very concise blog. He said. Islam is responsible for ISIS. And back, just about a year ago now, when the caliphate was officially announced back at the end of May, beginning of June of 2014, I went through one of my endless discourses on the history of the caliphate and how ISIS was just picking up the mantle, which really, with the decline of Islam, certainly by the end of the 19th century and the falling apart of the Ottoman Empire, you began to see these revivalist movements, particularly coming out of the Indian subcontinent. There was a huge movement 50 years before the Muslim Brotherhood. But at any rate, it's a continuation of an idealized vision of Islam as a conquering global power, and that's all that ISIS is. Paul is not wrong in some of the the dirty details about how they got their armaments, but that's just almost like an epiphenomenon. That's not the main issue.
Right. I think he boils it down to something where you can't really just lay all the blame at the feet of the individuals who supported arming rebels and that kind. We armed the Iraqis and then they just dropped their weapons and ran. Exactly.
And look, I am very, as you've seen from some of the things I've written, I am very down on this sugar-coated, roseate portrayal of what the surge was and what it actually accomplished. But in the near term, given the predicament that we were in, and the fact that it was actually concocted, not so much by Petraeus, actually, but I'm reading now a wonderful book by General Bolger, a little-known captain who was Arabic fluent, sort of floated the idea, and they began to get some of these Sunni tribes that really had been cooperating, quite frankly, Sam, with Al-Qaeda in Iraq, as it was called back then, because of internecine disputes and very bloody reprisals by Al-Qaeda in Iraq. We were able to transiently get them to turn, and they did help us calm things down briefly, almost like a Band-Aid, or like what General Bolger refers to it as giving a feverish patient at least some aspirin. So if those people had to be armed to a certain extent to do that, but it
all
really,
right.
I'm sorry, it misses the bigger picture. That too misses the bigger picture.
Right. We had Iraq was was a sovereign state when we left, and we left too soon. I think the argument can be made, and we've had this discussion, you and I, comparing it to Japan. Now, if we had vanquished Japan in the war, we won the war, World War II, we got their concessions, and then we went home, what do you suppose would have happened with Japan?
Oh, but here's where I do disagree with you on the substance. First of all, again, I don't. There was simmering violence for the whole period that we were still in Iraq until we left, and the status of forces agreement by which we left was on the basis of something negotiated by President Bush, not by President Obama. All the timelines that Obama followed were set in place by President Bush. There was simmering violence for that whole period. We had, in effect, created a Shiite central government with peripheral enclaves of both Sunnis and Kurds. It was an untenable situation. What we did very different in Japan, first of all, is that we decimated the country. We crippled the country. We completely defeated it, and it surrendered unconditionally. We also outlawed political Shinto. This is 180 degrees from what we did with even the transient successes that were achieved in Iraq. We brought in academic eggheads who literally crafted Sharia-based constitutions for Iraq and Afghanistan, by the way. This is 180 degrees from what we did with Japan, Sam, both militarily and sociopolitically.
But this stems from a misunderstanding.
With the extent of the occupation, Sam, is what I'm saying. It's the qualitative impact as well.
Oh yeah, well I group both of those things together. My ultimate point is, we had the people who were in charge, leadership, had very little understanding of Islam, clearly, because if you understand Islam, if you understand Sharia, then you have to concede that Sharia is 180 degrees from the freedom that we have in this Judeo-Christian country. And so if you want to establish a democracy, which can really only work with freedom, you cannot you can't concede to Sharia, which is what they did, what you just said. They codified into law the Sharia. They embraced Islam, and that's how we got to the situation where we are, which is the opposite of what they did in Japan.
Well,
and incidentally, we did a similar thing in Germany after the war, and we're still in Germany.
But what I'm saying though is that first of all, again, you can and these are military people who've argued this, is that, you know, this was nothing near the kind of victories that were achieved militarily in either Germany or Japan. First of all, we also lived in we were occupying in an environment where these are very interesting polling data from the height of the success of the surge. So in March 2008, 42% of the Iraqis labeled attacks on U.S. forces acceptable. Only 4% believed that we were responsible for the transient decline in violence, and 61% felt that our troop presence was actually making the sectarian situation worse. Now, you know, you could argue that, well, that's kind of delusive. Look at what happened after we left. But that's what the population believed. Also, Sam, I think it's critical, and this is not something that you're going to hear in the discussions by conservative partisans. We abandoned Iraq's minorities for the whole period we were there. We did absolutely nothing to protect them. They bled. They fled. Up until 2011, the Christian population declined by 2/3.
We did worse than that. I'm sorry, hold on. You said we did nothing for them. We did worse than that. We embraced their oppressors.
Exactly. And at the height of the surge, when we had 166,000 troops on the ground, this made me bristle last summer. Where people had forgotten, at the height of the surge, when there was all this clamor, rightfully so, about what was happening to the Yazidis on Mount Sinjar, in 2007 of August, so 7 years before the horrors that were taking place last summer, the worst single day including what happened last summer. 800 Yazidis were killed in a single day at the height of the surge by synchronized homicide bombings. 1,600 were seriously injured. That was at the height of the surge because they were never a priority of ours, ever. No matter how many troops we had on the ground there. And this is a serious flaw. And by the way, it extends to what the Brits did, for heaven's sake. When they pulled out in the 1930s, in the mid-1930s, the Kurds and the Sunni Arabs got together and massacred the Assyrians. And even after that occurred, I have a quote from a British Arabist of that era writing, well, it's a sort of a bump in the road, but Iraq is moving towards less sectarianism, and we think that they will overcome the constraints of the Sharia. This was written in 1935, Sam. After 10 years of
I only have one phrase to cover all of that, and that's willful ignorance. Because if I can know this stuff and you can know this stuff, there's no reason that they can't know this. And also, it's an abdication.
What should we do going forward? What should we do going forward? And we have to have a serious debate about this, because I don't claim to have clear, concrete, absolutely rigidly correct answers. No one.
No, but if you do have an answer, you got 30 seconds. Yeah. What's your answer?
Well, what I think this should teach us, and it apparently is not teaching us, based on the Republican candidates, is that Senator Paul may be way off in many things, but at least he's approaching what needs to be part of the discussion, which is that do we get ourselves involved in situations beyond just what our immediate security needs are, and what are our immediate security needs, including our own borders.
I got to take a break. Andrew Bostom, thank you so much for coming on the show. I got to take a break. I'll be right back.